seriously popular.
Hello, happy Wednesday, Kelly. Another insane day here in MAGAland. Lots and lots to talk about that has happened since we spoke on Monday.
That's right. There's a lot to unpack today, and we are lucky to be joined by Rob Crilly, our chief U.S. political correspondent here in D.C. He'll be chatting with us today about his exclusive interview with JD Vance, some insight into what the vice president's doing, his relationship with Trump. And then we'll be going into some of Trump's major events this week. That includes his meeting with France's Macron, his first cabinet meeting, which just wrapped up a few minutes ago, and some major announcements that he's been making this week, including a new gold card replacement for the green card program in the United States, some new DOGE announcements, including slashing of millions of more federal employees. And then there's been a huge shakeup in the White House press pool. So we'll get into all of that and more right after this break.
Welcome to MAGAland.
We're back in MAGAland. We're lucky to be joined today by Rob Crilly, the chief U.S. political correspondent in D.C. Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Yeah, good to be with you. Thank you.
We're excited to discuss with you an exclusive sit-down interview that you had with JD Vance. There were a couple stories that you broke out of it, particularly the story about his reaction to Trump saying that he might not be the natural heir or successor coming up in 2028. So take us inside your meeting with him. How was he on a personal level, and what was some of the news that you got out of it?
I was invited into his West Wing office last week for the interview. It was interesting to see that office. We used to think the ceremonial office he has in a separate part of the White House campus at the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, which is where he swears in cabinet secretaries. There's a lot of wood paneling, white maple, a very impressive room. This was more the office where stuff gets done. It was smaller, just about enough room to get all his aides and people he's meeting in, but the West Wing is cramped. So although it was a big office by West Wing standards, by any other standards, it wasn't. And he hasn't really had time to stamp his personality on it yet. It was still mostly the decor that Kamala Harris would have known it by. There's some pale green walls, a couple of white sofas. But the personal touches he's added actually are a couple of US Marine Corps things, a big scarlet flag behind his desk, a seal on the wall. And he also has a signed football signed by the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, his team. So we had time between meetings. He just got off the phone from President Trump. He was just about to head to the Hill for some meetings there, legislative staff, nominee staff. But the big question really is, what is his relationship with Donald Trump? About 10 days earlier, Trump had been offered an opportunity to endorse him for the 2028 nomination, and Trump simply said no. But he's doing a good job, he quickly added. How did Vance feel about that? Well, JD Vance told me Trump gave exactly the correct answer. Now is not the time for politics. Now is the time for getting down to work, getting the job done. And there'll be plenty of time for politics in the future. Midterms coming up towards the end of next year. But make no doubt about it, JD Vance is the obvious successor. But Vance was very relaxed and felt that now was not the time to start talking about the race.
Rob, I also wanted to ask you, because what a privilege that you got to go on his first international trip with him. And these are exactly the details that we love to hear in MAGAland that aren't covered anywhere else. JD Vance came with a much different message from the U.S. to our European allies. It's certainly not the same tone that the previous administration had. It's a message that made headlines across the world and has continued to, as the Trump administration continues to say, we are not the policemen of the world. Europe has to take care of itself. How would you say JD Vance's message was received on this trip?
And it was extraordinary. The auditorium where he delivered the speech wasn't a big place, and it was packed out. Not even any standing room left, 3-4 deep in all the aisles. And it was warm to start with all those bodies in there, but the temperature just rocketed with his explosive words. I was actually sitting next to some American lawmakers who came from across the political spectrum, but even they, presumably noting roughly what Vance was going to say, were stunned into silence at the end of it. Didn't really move for a couple of minutes as they absorbed it all. And it was similar down on the floor. You could see European leaders just sitting shell-shocked. And, Europe is desperate to find out what Trump's plan is for peace and security in the region. Ukraine has raised all these questions about the security guarantees that the US provides. And all these nations have cut back on their defense spending to enjoy a Cold War peace dividend. But now are having to face up to reality. The US may not be there. And I think since that speech, we've started to hear interesting murmurs from the French in particular. France is one of the two nuclear-armed European nations. They've started to talk about providing nuclear protection for other European nations. Vance's speech was a cold, hard dose of reality for European leaders.
You also were there for another historical meeting, really, coming off of this change in narrative from the US government. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, met with Donald Trump this week in the White House. There were several viral moments from this meeting. We have been talking here in MAGAland a lot about the right way to treat Trump. We have thought that JD Vance, Elon Musk do it the right way. They like to repeat that they are working for Trump. I think we mentioned Zelensky did not know how to treat Trump with enough admiration, but it seems to me that Emmanuel Macron did a good job. We saw that super long handshake. We did see both things, signs of a bromance, but we also had this moment of fact-checking. They seem very friendly, but Macron was like, 1 second, I have something to say about that. Let's take a listen.
Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money, to be clear.
Rob, what was it like in the room? Was there tension? Did they seem like friends? Were they both trying to show their power? What about that really long handshake? Which, by the way, we have to mention the White House says that Trump now has a bruise on his hand because of excessive handshaking. Tell us from the scene, what was it like?
Macron has done this before. 2018, I think, when they met, or maybe it was 2017, he kept hold of Trump's hand, and an even longer one. And you could see the white knuckles on his hands. He described it as a moment of truth. And he was there to lay down his position as a man of Macron knows that Trump is impressed by power, hence the handshake. But also, he thinks that he has made a friend in the president. Goes back to 2017 when Trump was a guest at the Bastille Day parade and was very impressed by all the French military hardware. They held hands. Macron kissed him on the cheek on a previous visit. Now, I think we saw a slightly different relationship during their press conference in the East Room of the White House. He mentioned how Macron managed to get away with correcting Trump in the Oval Office. And not many people could do that and live. I think the point I would make is, did any of this make any difference? Trump continued to exaggerate the amount of money the US has given to Ukraine. He has continued to use all the exaggerations he's always used. And Macron appeared not to get any concessions out of Trump at all.
Rob, what do you think is going to happen on Friday when Zelensky comes to the White House to sign the minerals deal? Do you think there'll be a clear public kind of struggle for power that we saw with the handshake with Macron? Or do you think the body language will be different? Do you think because Zelensky recently came out and slapped back at Trump, who had just called him a dictator, if that's going to cause any physical stress or apparent strife?
This could go in all sorts of different directions. I'm hearing that the deal has not been finalized. There's still a lot of negotiations going underway. Now, the thing for the Zelensky is he has a very weak hand. He's essentially lost Washington as his big backer. He came out firing, all guns blazing last week, criticizing Trump. Publicly criticizing the president is not the best way to go about things. Zelensky has got to face some cold, hard truths before Friday and decide, is this the best deal he's going to get? We've got to look at the British Prime Minister, visiting tomorrow. He arrives Wednesday night or meet Trump on Thursday. And really, this is the European tag team. Macron Monday, Starmer coming in Thursday. I'm told that relationship is pretty warm between Starmer and Trump. But I think Starmer is really going to be driving the European position, which is that the UK and the French are prepared to put boots on the ground, but there has to be some sort of American buy-in to securing Ukraine's sovereignty.
I want to go back quickly to Vance's European trip because on our podcast in MAGAland, we've discussed how Elon Musk parades around his kids. Vance has been doing the same thing. He's brought his young kids along with Usha on his foreign trips, which traditionally we don't see quite so often. Can you give us some insight into why it's important for him to bring his family with him?
Yeah, he did a bit of it on the campaign trail. And in fact, his middle son, Vivek, celebrated his 5th birthday in Paris. They made a celebration of that. And JD Vance told me, paraphrasing slightly, but that it kept him human. It kept him real, that he could do the international diplomacy by day, but then get home, kick off his shoes, and relax with the kids. And in fact, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but one of the reasons I didn't get the interview with Vance when we were on the trip is that coming back on Air Force 2, as soon as they got on board, the vice president had changed into his sweats and was mucking around with the kids. He didn't want to spend time being interviewed by me. I think it keeps him sane a little bit. I know that the Trump side of operations in the West Wing loved the contrast. You have a president who spends a lot of time deliberately looking presidential, but then officials I was talking to were still raving about that viral clip of JD Vance coming out of a diner in Ohio in his hoodie and jeans, saying that contrast really allows the Trump-Vance team to reach the whole of America.
Those are the details we love to hear in MAGAland. Yes, all the things you're not supposed to tell us, please tell us. Thank you so much, Rob.
Lovely to speak with you.
We're back in MAGAland, and it's time to talk about Trump's first cabinet meeting. What a sight, Kelly. Trump yesterday announced that Elon Musk was going to be part of this meeting, even though he's not part of Trump's cabinet officially. I thought the side of this meeting was quite something, and again shows the new world order. We had the WWE matriarch Linda McMahon, we had Robert Kennedy Jr., we had former Fox News host Pete Hegseth, and we had richest man in the world Elon Musk also taking a part. I thought it was interesting when Trump said, if anyone here doesn't let Elon speak, we're throwing you out, and they all started clapping. Kelly, what was going on?
It certainly was an inside look into how Trump views his cabinet and who's the most powerful in his eyes, because Elon was the first to be invited to speak. So he got up right away. He was speaking about Doge and their work to slash a goal of $1 trillion by the end of September. Elon actually ripped open his jacket blazer and it had a tech support shirt on. So he was making a joke that he's Trump's personal tech support in the government. He was running through the list of the line items Doge has already slashed. And in a really notable moment, Trump was asked by a member of the White House pool about whether he has any concerns that other cabinet members aren't so fond of Elon Musk and they might have some issues with him. Trump did admit that, yes, there might be some drama behind the scenes, but he said if anyone has a public issue with Elon Musk, then they can be thrown out of the cabinet. And I think there was some nervous laughter among the secretaries in the room. Obviously, everyone was shaking their head, no, that's not me. Elon was able to continue speaking for another 10, 15 minutes. He was actually the only cabinet secretary that actually stood up and presented about their agency. So I think it's showing once again, Elon is in this shadow cabinet. He has the position of high power right alongside Trump, and he's not going anywhere.
It was very interesting to watch, especially because in this very official setting where it's a cabinet meeting, they're all wearing suits, they're all dressed to the nines, and Elon was just himself with these shirts that he likes to put his slogans on. He also mentioned how many death threats he's getting because he's doing this. He said if we don't cut this extra spending, the US will be bankrupt. He says that he's trying to save the country $1 trillion in savings to end the deficit. That all sounds very good again, but we have the other side of that because there's been more controversy this week with Doge. So the Associated Press reported that as many as 20 civil servants had resigned from Doge because they were refusing to dismantle critical public services. The AP framed this as it was like a move of protest by these federal employees who don't want to do what Elon Musk is telling them to do. However, Elon Musk then came out saying that the AP was lying and these were Democrat political holdovers that would have been fired anyway. We're seeing how these former federal workers are starting to speak out about what they feel is a dismantling of democratic institutions. I saw that this has already affected unemployment numbers in DC. So he's doing a lot.
Oh, yeah. This was a big action this week because I think there was some confusion around who inside of Doge was actually getting fired. It wasn't actually Elon's nerd army who are in every agency now slashing funding left and right. These were bureaucrats who were in the agency that Elon Musk transformed into Doge. A lot of them, apparently, according to officials in the White House, weren't answering emails. They weren't up to speed on what was actually going on inside of their own agency. So that's why they were fired. But it is notable because there were only about 100 of these employees left over, and now they're slashed to about half. There's an unknown exact number of how many Nerd Army members there are. So it has downsized quite a bit, but it goes to show that email that Elon sent out over the weekend saying, send me your 5 bullets by Monday or Tuesday at midnight or face firing was legit. That also came up again in the cabinet meeting. Trump said that there are about 1 million people who haven't responded yet to that email. And he said that they're existing in this like sort of bubble, and a lot of them could be either dead, they could be running another job and then still collecting a paycheck from the US government. These are people, he said, that might not even check their emails for months and just skate by and still get money from the US taxpayer dollar. And he said all those million could be fired. And so he urged them to reply in the email or they're going to be terminated.
Yeah, in the cabinet meeting, I think Elon said something like, all you need to do this is a computer and 2 brain cells or something like this. Elon continues to call the AP the Associated Propaganda, and we've already talked about this administration's fight with the AP. It seems like the Associated Press is #1 on their list, which I thought how things have changed because it used to be CNN. The AP is usually seen as more of an unbiased wire service that's international. But Elon Musk went after it again. And at the same time, we get these news that the pool of reporters in the White House will be conducted in a different way. This has historically been set by the White House Correspondents Association. They designate which outlets take turns covering the White House. Well, the Trump administration says no more. Now we decide who gets to cover it. Kelly, you've been part of the pool. You know exactly how it works. How will it be different now? And of course, critics are saying this gives the Trump administration the ability to only choose friendly press.
It was certainly sending shockwaves across DC yesterday during that announcement, which came as a surprise to the entire White House press corps. Trump is really going after AP, and they've been throwing them out of events. And today, they actually barred the Huffington Post, Reuters, and a foreign press from the press pool that were allowed inside of the cabinet because those were next up on the rotating schedule that the White House Correspondents Association manages. So a change has already been implemented, and they let in press. And I noticed that Fox News was in the pool today, a few other more friendly outlets.
I need to understand, before it worked on a rotation. So there were no changes made. It's just a cycle and it goes on and on. Is that how it used to work?
Yes.
Okay.
So every news outlet that pays to be a part of the pool will be rotated throughout so everyone gets a chance. So some of the smaller news outlets or podcasters or new media types, as the White House calls them, wouldn't be a part of that pool because they aren't established in the White House Correspondents Association. So that was definitely a big moment out of the White House yesterday. Trump also announced that he would be starting a new Trump Gold Card program, which was a very new idea that we have not heard from the president before. Let's take a listen to what he said.
Something else that's going to be very, very good. We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people. And we think it's going to be extremely successful. Never been done before or anything like this, but it's something that we're going to be putting out over the next, would you say 2 weeks out? You want to?
So he said it's a new plan separate from the green card plan that we know so well, and it will be sold. He says a quote, green card privileges plus. It would offer you a route to citizenship, and there would be vetting to make sure that the migrants going through the gold card program don't have a criminal record. They're upstanding citizens of the countries that they currently reside in. He announced this in conjunction with his new Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Hermania, your thoughts on this?
I do think it sparks concerns about Russian, Chinese oligarchs being able to easily come to the US. I do hope if this goes into effect, they do go through a very thorough check that's not just based on how much money they have in the bank, because across the world, there are a lot of not well-meaning millionaires.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's such a high price tag because Trump has really been vocal about offsetting the national debt. So I think this would be one way, I guess, he would see of doing this. It's a definitely unique proposal. It would help a little bit, I guess. It probably wouldn't make too big of a dent because I don't know how many migrants having 5 million around. So it would attract a certain type or certain level, like you said, oligarch level. It'll be interesting to see. He said it's going to be rolled out in the next 2 weeks. So it's actually coming really soon.
We also have to discuss, Kelly, both Trump's and the White House social media activity has been wild. They're doing whatever they want. They posted an ASMR video of them deporting a migrant. This just goes to show the mandate and the power they feel they have to just be publishing these things that so many consider inappropriate and racist. So yesterday, Trump got his critics in another spiral over a post that he shared. I guess it's an AI video that shows what Gaza could be like if it was Gazalago, the Riviera of Gaza. And it shows it like, this is Gaza now, and it shows it destroyed. And then here's what it could be. And at one point, you see a floating gold head of Trump. Kelly, what?
It's definitely bizarre. An AI generated video that sparked massive, I guess you could say, chatter on social media on the pro-Trump side and the anti-Trump side. It was also shared late at night as Trump was on his retruthing sprees, as he likes to do. And we've seen him amplify more out there videos in the past that have had to walk back. But this one was more of a utopia vision for, what's it called, MAGA Gaza.
Again, the left took it as another sign of what they think is an unstable person leading the free world.
That's also a great example of how Democrats hate this video and they're going crazy on Twitter about it, but there's really nothing they can do policy-wise. They don't have any majority in the House or Senate. They don't have a place in the executive branch. Last night on Capitol Hill, it was a major moment. The House passed President Trump's budget proposal. This is a proposal that has trillions of dollars in tax cuts. It also will cause the United States government to look at where we can slash money from within to offset the tax cuts. There are some fears that Medicare would be touched and other critical beneficiary programs. What was really interesting about what happened last night was in the House, there were 4 Republican holdouts. They were not going to vote against this piece of legislation no matter what. Keep in mind, Speaker Mike Johnson can only afford to lose 1 vote on every single piece of legislation that he puts on the floor. So he has a very tight margin. So he put the vote on the floor. He didn't have enough support. He quickly pulled it off. I would say less than 1 minute later, he put it back on the floor. Trump had spoken to these holdouts. within that time frame and convinced every single one of them to vote for it, which is shocking. And it shows Trump's true hold on Washington, D.C. and his power over the Republican Party right now.
Wow, that was another show filled with information. We're going to be back on Friday, and we have a very special guest. He's a media expert. Oliver Darcy used to be at CNN, now runs Status News, and he's going to tell us all the ways the media landscape is changing during the Trump administration.
Can't wait to tune into that. Remember to email us at welcometomagaland@dailymail.com and follow us on Instagram at welcometomagaland.